for so many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, the cruelty really is the point. They not only do not care, they, in some cases, relish the harm that they are inflicting on people.
Mm-hmm.
And in many cases, their perception is the harm that they are inflicting on people who don't vote for them. To see people who, when they occupy these positions, care so little for their own constituents and the effects of, not even arguable effects, the objective realities that their constituents will face because of their votes, because of their policies, that is jarring and sad to see up close.
Welcome to another episode of At Our Table. Today, I am excited that my dear friend, freshman Congresswoman Sarah McBride from the great state of Delaware is at our table. Welcome, Congresswoman.
Thank you for having me. And you should have said the greatest state.
You know, it's a pretty nice state. It's a pretty nice state. You know,
Listen,
South Carolina is still, we got some crazy people that we send up to Congress that but for the most part, the people here are fantastic.
I believe that the people of South Carolina are a lot better than the vast majority of South Carolinians in the House.
It's like a Looney Tune episode or something. I mean, as we love to say down here, bless their hearts.
Bless their hearts. And listen, you know how us Delawareans are. We can't pass up an opportunity to be nauseating statriots.
Oh, I know. I'm just so proud of you, Sarah. I was telling some of the team that the first time I got a chance to meet you was a few years ago when I came to Delaware. I think I was a bus tour, and we did a bunch of calls into people there about the importance of the election. And I was just, from that moment, was so impressed by your intellect, your spirit, the leadership that you just exude. And so it's great to have you as a member of Congress, not only representing your state of Delaware, but representing so many of us across the country.
That really means a lot. I remember that visit very well. It was a highlight for me of that election cycle. And listen, I'm glad I am here in Congress at this moment. It is a privilege. It is a privilege to represent Delaware, and it's certainly a heavy responsibility in this moment that I do not take lightly.
Yeah. Well, a lot of folks may not know a whole lot about your background. How did you get into politics? What was that moment in which the light switch turned on and you said, you know what? I got this crazy idea that I'm going to run for the legislature, I'm going to run for Congress. Like, give us a little bit into that backstory.
So, I wouldn't say that there was really one moment where I decided to run for Congress or to run for the state legislature. I think it was the culmination of really decades of experiences that I had. I was a nerd as a little kid, and I loved history. And, I thought maybe I would be a teacher. At one point, I wanted to be an architect. But when I was a young person, sort of trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, I was also, like so many young people to this day, really trying to figure out who I am and how I fit into this world. And as I started to become aware of the fact that there was something about me that society wasn't necessarily ready for, it seemed, when I started to realize that there were a lot of people out there who would dismiss me simply for one aspect of my identity, I started to face a crisis of hope. And I went searching for solutions. I went searching for hope. I went searching for examples of our world becoming kinder and more just and more inclusive to help me believe that perhaps I could live authentically and pursue my dreams at the same time, because it seemed so impossible that it was almost incomprehensible for me as a kid. And I stumbled across books about the Capitol and the White House And as I read those books, I realized that the through line of every chapter, of every story, was the story of advocates, activists, and a handful of courageous and effective elected officials working together to right the wrongs of our past, to address injustice, to bring people from the shadows and the margins of society into the circle of opportunity. And I found hope in that story. I found hope in the possibilities in our politics. And so I got involved at a young age. But, as I grew up, I was an advocate. I worked for the Human Rights Campaign. I helped pass non-discrimination protections and marriage equality in Delaware. I thought for a while that I would really stay in that advocacy space. But it was my experience as a caregiver to the man who would become my husband, Andy, during his battle with cancer, that I really had the experiences that propelled me to run for the state Senate and then eventually to run for Congress, because throughout that experience, as young as Andy was, as unpredictable as this experience with cancer was for a 25, 26-year-old, from the first moment after being diagnosed, we knew how lucky we were. And through radiation and chemotherapy and a surgery that left him having to relearn how to talk, how to eat, how to breathe, through getting married when we found out that his cancer had spread to his lungs, and walking him to his passing, up to his final breath, we both knew how lucky we were.
Yeah.
And I ran because I don't believe that in a state of neighbors like Delaware, nor in the wealthiest, most developed nation on earth, that time and that ability to get care should be a matter of luck. I think it should be the law of the land. And that's what spurred me to run for office, first in the state legislature and then for Congress.
Sarah, I've heard this time and time again. I think sometimes healthcare as a policy issue becomes just one of many issues. But I bet if you survey a lot of folks, particularly on our side of the aisle, many of them will find that healthcare is that motivating issue that has triggered, either because of their own health or the health of a loved one, or seeing the lack of healthcare in their communities, as something that has triggered people to act and to decide to step up and to serve. Given how important that issue was for you, talk about your thoughts about this awful bill that was just passed and how it will impact the healthcare of millions of Americans, and a lot right there in Delaware.
In Delaware, for sure. When I was in the Delaware State Senate, I was the chair of our health committee. I helped secure what could have been, perhaps if not for this bill, the largest ongoing new investment in our state's Medicaid program since the Affordable Care Act. I passed our paid family and medical leave. I certainly hope to be entering a Congress with a Democratic majority, with a Speaker, Hakeem Jeffries, where we were expanding access to quality, affordable health care nationwide. And obviously, that's not the Congress that I've entered. And this big, ugly bill, there's a lot of ugliness in this bill. There is a lot of... there's something for everyone to hate in this bill. And there's no question that at the heart of the motivation of this bill was Republicans and Donald Trump essentially paying off their billionaire donors with massive tax breaks. But in that bill, to just partially pay for it, they inserted the single largest cut in Medicaid in American history, and what amounts to the single greatest evisceration of healthcare in our country's history, period. I mean, this is the most heartless bill to pass through Congress in decades, perhaps generations. And with such a significant cut to healthcare, the reality is that for most Americans, what this bill is it is a fundamental remake of the American healthcare system. It is Trumpcare.
Yeah.
And Trumpcare results, one, in that massive cut to Medicaid, nearly $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid and Affordable Care Act funding. That is going to result in between 15 and 17 million Americans losing health coverage. But You might have some people who are listening who go, you know what, I'm not on the individual marketplaces. I don't rely on Medicaid for coverage, so maybe I'm okay. But the reality is that $1 trillion in cuts is essentially a ticking time bomb that congressional Republicans and Donald Trump have inserted into the American healthcare system. And it is a ticking time bomb that will go off in 2027. And when it does, and in the lead up to it, the anticipation of it going off, it will have collateral damage that impacts all of us. Because when you remove $1 trillion from the American healthcare system, the consequences are, one, that the patients who lose coverage, it's not that they never get care. It's that they wait longer to get care when they are sicker, and the treatment for that care is more expensive. And in order to pay for that more intensive, more expensive care that those patients will inevitably get without coverage, hospitals pass the cost on to all of us through higher premiums. But then on top of that, when you remove $1 trillion from doctors' offices, health clinics, hospitals, that they were relying on through Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act plans, some of them will be able to pass on that cost to private payers, to us, but others won't be able to survive that loss of funding. And so many hospitals, particularly in rural communities, will close, which leave all of us with higher premiums and having to drive longer and take more time off work in order to get care, having to wait longer to get care. And so the consequences are vast. They extend to all of us. And we have to make it clear that, one, every single time a patient loses coverage, every single time a hospital closes, every single time someone has to pay more or wait longer to get care, congressional Republicans own it. And we still have power because that ticking time bomb goes off in 2027.
Yep.
That means we have an election before that to elect people who will help to defuse that bomb, restore that care, restore that funding, and save the American healthcare system.
And I can tell you that is so crucial. And I really hope that, over the course of the next few weeks and months, the American people, the light turns on and the American people understand really the devastation that the Republicans in Congress and President Trump have really caused to this nation and to the healthcare of this nation. Now, you're in your first term being in Congress. I've spent a number of years working in and around the Hill. 20 years ago, I was the executive director of the House Democratic Caucus. And I remember when I first joined Mr. Clyburn's staff then, one of the things he said about Congress to me was, and that was a very different Congress than the Congress that you were serving in. But one of the things he said to me, he said that, Jamie, we may take different paths, meaning Democrats and Republicans, but hopefully the destination's the same, that we're all trying to get to the same place. That may have been the case 20 years ago. I don't believe that's the case now. You've gotten a crash course in Congress, and probably one of the worst Congresses in the history of this great nation of ours. What are some of the biggest surprises? What are some of the things that you have learned as a freshman member of Congress?
I think there are a couple of things that aren't necessarily surprising because we can all see it when we open our social media or turn on the TV, but it's really jarring to see up close. One is, to your point, that for so many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, the cruelty really is the point. They not only do not care, they, in some cases, relish the harm that they are inflicting on people.
Mm-hmm.
And in many cases, their perception is the harm that they are inflicting on people who don't vote for them.
Yeah.
And seeing, first off, that's not necessarily true. I mean, one of the challenges for our party is that the Republican coalition is changing. Now, their coalition might be changing or having changed. Their policies aren't, and they are completely fucking over their own voters at this point. But to see people who, when they occupy these positions, care so little for their own constituents and the effects of not even arguable effects
Yeah.
the objective realities that their constituents will face because of their votes, because of their policies. That is jarring and sad to see up close. But the second thing is that for so many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, the goal here is not progress. The goal here is not policy, even policies that I disagree with. The goal for them is attention.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing how much of this for some people here is purely a reality TV show is, again, unsurprising, but jarring. And these people put characters on. They're one way behind closed doors, and then they go out and they put this MAGA character on to suck up to daddy and to get clicks and attention on social media. And it's sad because this is a place of profound importance and profound potential to do good. And look, you need to get attention as a tool to get things through, particularly in today's day and age. But for people for whom attention is the end goal, I just wonder why on earth be here. You can go get a show on Fox News or start, a new show on whatever new right-wing media channel they have, if that's really ultimately your end goal.
Well, speaking about narcissistic, attention-seeking idiots, your colleague and my fellow South Carolinian, Nancy Mace, again, bless her heart, and
Bless
she she really seemed to put a bullseye on you. And really, it's bullying in so many aspects. Everything you teach your kids not to do and not to be like, Nancy Mace really embodies those qualities, and now she wants to be governor of South Carolina. Lord help us. But how have you dealt with her? Have you dealt with her directly, or have you had to interact with her in committee hearings? I think for a lot of young folks who may be bullied, who may be getting that type of negative attention from folks like Nancy Mace, give us a sense of how you deal with that and how you push back, because I think that's really, really important.
Yeah. So we don't serve on any committees together.
You're fortunate.
We do not really see each other in the halls very often. But, what was clear when everything was happening, particularly in November of last year when the bathroom ban was put forward, was that these folks aren't particularly passionate about bathroom policy.
Mm-hmm.
They were trying to gain attention for themselves.
Yep.
And when I talk about this being a reality TV show, what is the best way to get airtime on a reality TV show on The Real Housewives? It's to pick a fight with someone.
Yeah.
It's to throw wine in their face. And my understanding of all of that is that attention is the incentive. And so the more attention they get, the more they get what they want. And in a reality TV show, you throw wine in someone's face, you pick a fight, you might get some airtime. But what gets a season-long story arc is when there is a beef between two people. Mm-hmm. When that conflict turns into sustained mutual conflict. And I refuse to give them what they want. My power is in maintaining my own focus and my own story and my own voice in speaking out for Delawareans on the issues that they care about and that I'm passionate about. And I refuse to participate in the antics of reality TV shows here. And look, the good news is for me is that sustained beef, that feud, it takes two to tango, and I can't fucking dance. So, I'm here to do serious work because while I can't dance, I can legislate.
Yeah.
And that is what I am here to do. Now, and what I have seen, I will say, is that a lot of the Republicans have realized I'm just like no fun in that respect. And so they've largely moved on to people and to things that get them the attention that they want. But look, it hurts.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel good. And, one of the things that I have had to really understand, whether it's about some of my own colleagues here or people out in the world who say or do terrible things to people like me, is that it really does say a lot more about them than it does about me.
Yeah.
Hurt people hurt people. And sort of at the heart of the bless their heart comment
Mm-hmm.
is I really do hope that the folks who behave this way find healing, because there are hurt people everywhere and there are hurt people in Congress. And I think a lot of the people who you see engage in such self-destructively attention-seeking behavior, I hope they get the love and the support and the healing that they so obviously need.
You have preached a whole sermon right there. You really have. And I think that's at the core of it. A lot of these members didn't get enough hugs as kids. They didn't get enough, I love you as kids. They didn't get enough of their parents reading them books, didn't get enough of all of those things. And what they do now as adults, and they have a little semblance of power, is they act out. And it is shameful, and it's just not a good model for our kids to look up to. So I so appreciate the way that you have tried to diffuse the situation, move on, and how you have carried yourself with so much dignity and focus, because it's, you get sent to DC not because of who you are, but because of what you will do. And I think the people in Delaware know how hard you will work for them and how hard you are working for them now. Go ahead, Sarah.
No, and I will just say, on this too, because, I think just since we're having a conversation among friends and this is family, this is all hurt. This is all hurt. And I'm not, but I'm lucky, right? Because I am living my truth and I've reached my dreams. I mean, I am having the privilege of serving in Congress, and a lot of people aren't nearly as lucky. But I also, I will say, some of the stuff that I have struggled with the most with all of this is sometimes the lack of grace that I've received on within our own coalition.
So within the Democratic Party.
Well, not colleagues here, and not the party, but that there have been some folks within my own community who, look, reasonable minds disagree on strategy and tactics and all of that, and I've said and done things that folks in my own community disagree with on various fronts, but I believe that the only way that I can fulfill any responsibilities I have as a first, or any responsibilities I have to any community I'm a part of, is to quite simply be the best member of Congress that I can be.
Yeah.
I am not here to be a martyr. I'm here to be a member of Congress.
Yeah.
And I am the first person here, and often that comes with indignities.
Yep.
And that is true throughout history. And the best thing that I can do for the trans community is not only to be a good member of Congress that proves that trans people are full people who care about all of the issues that impact all of us, including trans people, but it's also to not make this about claiming a toilet seat, but about making this claiming a seat in Congress, and to provide a very clear visual contrast to the public between the bullies and the bullied.
Yes.
Right? And throughout history, we have these images of people who are firsts entering spaces where there have indignities being hurled at them, literal or verbal indignities. And the sad reality is that when you are a first, there's a line in the movie 42, and I'm not comparing myself at all, but when Jackie Robinson is talking with the owner of the Brooklyn Dodgers, the owner of the Brooklyn Dodgers is trying to provoke him into anger. And he says, when you are a first, if you respond to a slur with a slur, they'll only hear yours.
Yeah.
And if you respond to a punch with a punch, they'll say you're the aggressor. If people see me yelling back and fighting back in that viscerally comforting way, the voter will often just see two people yelling at each other, and then it's a pox on both your houses. People need that clear visual contrast so they understand whose side they should be standing on, who is the bully and who is the bullied.
Sarah, that is so heavy, and I feel the emotional weight for you talking about that. And there are opportunities and times in my past that I've been the first Black to do this, and first Black chair of the South Carolina Democratic and all. And yes, you get all of those things, but sometimes the thing that hurts the most is when there are folks within your own family who don't support you and don't. And I think part of it is sometimes they don't get the weight or the pressures that are coming from all of these various directions. And what you're trying to do is just to be the very best that you can be and do and to represent the community in the best way forward. And I feel the emotional weight of that. And
well, and I think so many people understand that. And I will say, look, I think people are understandably and rightfully scared in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you are a first in a moment of such significant risk for people like you, the reality is that the expectations and the hopes to try to stop it, or to at least provide sort of the viscerally comforting fight in front of you, can be impossible to meet. And my hope is that over time, people will see that this strategy that I have taken is working. I've already seen that it's working. I see it and I feel it here. And I see it here in the change in how colleagues on the other side of the aisle treat me, the infrequency with which I face the indignities at this point, and my ability to introduce and move forward bipartisan legislation, from consumer protections to legislation lowering the cost of groceries to legislation that's expanding FMLA benefits for workers. I've been able to introduce multiple bills on a bipartisan basis. I've been able to be effective already, in part because of this strategy. And I think that pays dividends, not just for my constituents, but for anyone who's like me nationwide in the medium and long term. Because at the end of the day, the only way to stop these attacks is to remove the incentives. That means changing the politics, and that means opening hearts and changing minds.
Yeah. I think this is a good segue into, I want to reflect a little bit on the 2024 elections, about the direction of the Democratic Party, where we're going, who we're fighting for, what we should be fighting for. And one of the things that came up, and in my last few months as DNC chair, I tried to push back on it, is this whole conversation of identity politics. Right. And some folks within our own party, some folks within the press in particular, saying, the Democratic Party went too far in terms of identity politics. And I can't tell you how many times people have asked me about identity politics. In the wake of 2024, it is something that is constantly used as a reason why we did not win. That we were too focused on identity politics and not on pocketbook issues. And I don't know if you have any thoughts in terms of that. Do you think we went too far in terms of that? Do you think we weren't out there enough? What are your thoughts about this, the boogeyman that has become identity politics in Democratic Party politics?
Yeah. So look, I think what's clear is that the Republicans are the party that is obsessed with identity politics.
Yes.
The Republican Party is the one that is focused on culture war issues. They're the ones talking about and spending a lot of money, caricaturizing and targeting vulnerable groups in this country. They're the ones that prioritize time and time again these policies. We've seen more executive orders and more legislative action on culture war issues in Congress and in the executive branch over the last few months than we have seen actions to lower the cost of groceries or to lower the cost of living writ large for people. And so what's clear is that objectively the Republican Party is the party that is obsessed. Unfortunately, there is a perception that our party is more obsessed than the Republicans with cultural war issues. Look, I think part of that is a byproduct of the Republican sustained disinformation and misinformation machine. But part of it, I think, is enhanced or emboldened by a purity politics on issues that typically fall into this camp, not just with who we select as candidates, but who we even welcome into our coalition as voters, right? And the message we are sending to voters. Because a voter, even if we're not talking about these issues, a voter will say, well, if being perfect down the line on every single issue impacting, trans folks is the only way for me to be welcomed into your coalition, if I'm a bigot because I agree with, the policies impacting trans people 90% of the time, but I'm not there on maybe 10% of the agenda, then even if you're not talking about it, what you're communicating to me is that is a threshold issue, which means it's a priority issue.
Yeah.
And so I think that this sort of sense of we have no room for imperfect allies plays into a sustained disinformation campaign by the right wing that we are preoccupied with culture war issues, with social issues. And so I think that we really need to be clear in rejecting the politics of purity that says there's no room for imperfect allies, both because we have to build a coalition necessary to win, but also you cannot change hearts and minds if you aren't able to be and willing to be in conversation and coalition with people who are still on a journey on those issues. And so I think that's very critical for us. I will also say, as we grapple with all of this, that we don't need to, nor should we, betray our values.
Yeah.
We don't need to, and nor should we, throw communities under the bus. And I think that we have to be a big tent as a party. And that big tent means making room for people who are more moderate or centrist than many of us are, and not saying you're not welcome here if you're only with us on 80% of our policy agenda. But that also means the big tent goes both ways and includes not excluding people on the left. And we have to recognize that we don't have to reject or sacrifice the left in order to win the center. We have to be a big tent across the board. And I think that means sort of uniting on three basic principles. One, that working people need more help. Two, that democracy is good. And three, that we aren't assholes to people.
Well, and I think
assholes to people on the left, center left, or on the center, or even folks who maybe are a little bit to the right of center, who we might actually be able to get because they abhor what they are seeing from MAGA and neighbors.
I think that's exactly right. And the notion that we are all, people aren't stagnant. We're always evolving. We're always changing. One of the things Sarah, and I think you're a perfect person to chat with about this, and would love to get your perspective. In 2024 on the presidential race in particular, we saw that trans rights was used by the Republicans in so many attack ads. And I think, they saw that they could be effective there. And I think we're going to see similar ads in 2026. And, the big one that attacked Vice President Harris is they had one and it said, she's for they, them, Trump is for you. And that got so much attention. And I think we as Democrats didn't know how to respond. And some members of the Democratic Party didn't know how to respond. And it's partly because we do recognize that we're in a big tent, that we may not be perfect in terms of the perfect statement. And we got a lot of really smart people making decisions in our party. But what do you think the party could have done? And what do you think folks in the party should do moving forward to make sure that we can effectively communicate and push back against these efforts? I would love to get your advice, because I bet there's so many Democrats who are looking for some direction there.
I do think it was a problem that our party didn't explicitly respond to the anti-trans attacks. We can't ignore these issues. We can't just not respond and leave the narrative entirely to the Republicans. Obviously, we have to make sure that in our proactive agenda, we are always centering the needs of a diverse working class. We need to make it clear that we reject an absolute purity politics that says there's no room for voters who aren't with us on everything. But we have to be able to respond. And I will say, I think that one of the reasons why the sense that I have gotten from some Democrats as I talk to them, that you often see silence from Democrats in response to these attacks is because, to your point, they don't know how to respond, not because they don't know what they believe or how they feel, but because they feel like there is no way to respond in a way that doesn't result in everyone yelling at them.
Yes.
And hate.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And you know, that I wouldn't be surprised if it was like, we don't want to piss off the trans community by responding in a way that's still supportive, but maybe isn't exactly what is most viscerally comforting to them.
Yeah.
But obviously, you know, we're never going to respond in a way that satisfies folks who are completely consumed by transphobia, you know, on the far right MAGA base. And so it sort of forces people to just shut down and not say anything. Yeah. And I think partly what we have to do, what I've been trying to do, is create more space for my colleagues to engage on these issues in ways that are authentic to them, and to say, you don't have to have perfect terminology. You don't have to have the perfect maximalist position on this issue to fight back against attacks on vulnerable people in this country, right? You can grapple with maybe yours or others' questions and uncertainty or concerns around, for instance, trans people participating in sports. Acknowledge that there are very real questions out there, that there are concerns out there. But who is best able to answer those questions about how to balance respect and fairness in women's sports? It's not 435 members of Congress who know nothing about women's sports and even less about trans people. It's the individual athletic associations that understand their sports the best.
Yep.
And the same is true for healthcare. The same is true across the board. And to make it very clear that this is all part of a political strategy. We can't just go directly to the political strategy. We have to answer on the merits of these policies. But we have to also pull back the curtain on what is going on here. Because, as my friend Greg Kassar says, it's not trans people who are paying you an unlivable wage. It's not trans people who are decimating your benefits. It's billionaires. It's the wealthy. But Republican politicians are employing a strategy as old as politics itself, and that is to divide our country and to misdirect the public's attention. Because every single time they talk about trans people, look at what they're doing with their grubby hands, because I guarantee you they're picking the pocket of American workers, they're fleecing seniors, they're trying to undermine our momentum toward a diverse working class coalition in this country that actually builds an economy that works for everyone rather than just lining the pockets of wealthy individuals and corporations. And I think we have to be crystal clear about that, while also pushing back against these attacks in ways that doesn't dismiss everyone with a question or a concern as a closed-minded bigot.
I think your last answer crystallized who the Republicans are. They are the masters at picking on the most vulnerable in our society while protecting the most privileged. And that's what they do. Every bill that you take a look at the author, it is that. They are going to pick on the most vulnerable, and they're going to protect the most privileged. Okay, Congresswoman, wanted to see if there are any particular projects, issues, things that you are working on that you want to highlight for our listeners, because maybe you want to get them involved or activated or motivated on a particular thing. So if there's something special that you're working on right now, we'd love to hear it.
Well, I want to first mention I was the first freshman to introduce legislation this Congress. It was legislation addressing abusive practices by so-called credit repair organizations that charge these large upfront fees to consumers on empty promises. We've got really, really important bills on a whole host of issues. But the reason why I ran for Congress, the work that I'm doing right now as the chair of the Care Economy Task Force with the New Dems, is to modernize our care economy and guarantee affordable childcare for every family and paid family and medical leave for every worker. That is my life's mission. That is what I want to achieve while I am in Congress. I want to be part of a Congress that finally passes paid family medical leave and affordable childcare for every person. And I won't stop working until we get there.
Well, thank you for that, because childcare is it's probably the biggest barrier for folks entering the workforce. Because if you don't have anybody to watch your kids, and in public schools, I remember early on when my wife and I had our first son, 2 or 3 years old, and we didn't have family in town who could watch him. In the public schools, he could only be there for half of the day. Well, your job is, 8-10 hours. Half a day of childcare isn't enough. So what do you do? That means either one of the parents have to stay home to watch the kid. You got to get a nanny that you may not be able to afford. So childcare is such a huge issue for so many working people.
That's right. We have a 1950s care infrastructure for a 2025 workforce in this country. And right now, we've got folks who say, it costs more to send my kid to childcare than it does for me to stay in this job that I love, that I want to, and that we need. And so I'm going to leave the workforce entirely because childcare is too expensive. And that part of the equation doesn't even factor into the fact that for many people who can't even maybe afford it, they can't get a spot at a childcare facility because there aren't enough seats for kids. And so it is a crisis in this country. It has been a crisis in this country, but it is one that is particularly acute right now. And I think that the greatest hole in our social safety net in this moment is the fact that we do not have a cradle through career support system that lowers costs for families, improves outcomes for children, and allows everyone to pursue the American dream, which includes starting a family. And I think this is an issue that isn't just right at the heart of our values and morals as Democrats, but as Americans. But this is vital for our country to compete economically, for us to tap the full talents and skills of the diverse workforce that is our competitive advantage here in the United States. And this lack of affordable childcare, lack of paid leave, the fact that we are pushing people out of the workforce, the fact that we make it far too difficult for people to start families because it is unaffordable, that is a major challenge for our country now and in the years to come.
This is yet another example of how the Democrats are very different from the Republicans.
As we wrap up, we do something every episode, which is one of my favorite things to do, actually. And it's we hand out a special award. And I call it the Sit Your Ass Down Award. And so you get an opportunity to give this very esteemed award to somebody in the body politic or just somebody who do you believe that just needs to sit their ass down for a minute and get themselves grounded. So, Sarah McBride, who is the recipient of your Sit Your Ass Down Award?
Well, I'm not going to pick the person or the folks in my chamber that everyone would expect me to pick. I'll say right now, Josh Hawley, sit your ass down. You just voted to gut Medicaid for your constituents. Stop trying to pretend like you're some defender of Medicaid when you know your shit ain't going anywhere in the Senate to reverse these cuts. When you claim that you were going to defend Medicaid, that you were never going to vote for anything that cuts people's health care, sit your ass down. You just did it. And you're not going to be the savior of people's health care. You're the one that destroyed it.
So this episode, y'all, the recipient of the Sit Your Ass Down Award Senator Josh Hawley from the great state of Missouri. Well, Sarah, I have so enjoyed this conversation, and I'm looking forward to more conversations. Want to have you come down to South Carolina sometime soon as well, and I'll come up to Delaware too. But it is always good seeing you, my friend, and I'm so grateful for your leadership in Congress.
Thank you. So good to see you as well.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.
If you enjoyed today's show, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Pixel Plus, YouTube, Spotify, or anywhere you find your podcasts. To be the first to know who will be at our table next, be sure to subscribe to our Substack on atourtablepodcast.com. At Our Table with Jamie Harrison is a production of Vision Blue Media. Our founding executive producers are Jason Hayter and Jamie Harrison. Our producers are Kyle Kelly and Emily Harrell. Our content consultants are Ernie Grigg and Clay Middleton. Our digital communications are led by Celie Riccio. Neil Rossini of FWRV LLP provides production legal. Wade Sellers, Kyle Kelly, Jay Matheson, Jeremy Dickerson, and Adrian Williams are our field production team. Alana Davis is our intern. Title sequence by Tom Hunt. Our theme song, Blonde Gone, is written by Dewey and published by Alibi Music Library. Special thanks to Crystal Spain, Jay Parmalee, and the South Carolina Democratic Party. Very special thanks to Congresswoman Sarah McBride and her team. I'm Jamie Harrison, and I look forward to another conversation at our table.